Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, colleagues. We will soon start with the training webinar on the model regulation guidelines for ceiling funds. We will just give a few minutes because people are still joining, and then we will begin. Thank you very much. Dan, can you hear us now? Is it okay? Dan from EFC, can you hear me now? Is it okay?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay, and Max, can you hear me as well now?
Yes, sorry, Marco. Yes, I was having some difficulty joining, but I just heard you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, there were some difficulties for some reason with the links, but apparently it's okay. We have you and Tan here, and also Bishal, who will also be speaking, will be connecting in a few minutes. He will be speaking later on. So I think we can then start. So thank you everyone for joining. My name is Marco Duran. I work with UNEP United for Efficiency, based in the Paris office. And together, well, I will be joined by a really good and renowned experts in this and other energy efficiency related topics that will be providing different perspectives, global perspective first, and then national and regional perspective. Before we start, just some housekeeping as well. So the webinar will be recorded. By participating, you're giving consent to this, and then the intention is that we will post this webinar for further consultation by other colleagues, experts, and officials that may not be able to join at this time zone or today. You can write any comment that you may have in the window as shown here in this symbol at the top of the bar. Then you can raise your hand in the Q&A session if you wish to convene your questions by orally. And then we have a Q&A section as well where you can type in your questions for the speakers, and we will have a dedicated session for that. Okay, let's go over the agenda. So for the opening, we have the pleasure to have Ms. Sneha Sakar from the Clean Cooling Collaborative, who will be providing a global perspective on how we can make the most of ceiling funds and the role on energy efficiency. Then I'll provide some context on the U4E model regulation guidelines, the role, the approach, and the progress that we took for the development of this last year, at the end of last year. Then we have Max Wei, Mr. Max Wei from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, who is our technical partner in the development of this guidelines, and then he will be introducing the contents, the rationale, and the analysis behind, and the recommendations as well. Then we'll move to Mr. Bishal Tapa from CLASP on catalyzing its transition to energy efficient funds and opportunities for other countries to achieve ambitious energy efficiency levels, leveraging the model regulations and other best practices. And then we'll move to Mr. Tan Zheng from Energy Foundation China, who will provide us some perspectives on accelerating the adoption of energy efficiency ceiling funds and lessons learned from China's MEPS program. And then an interactive Q&A session moderated by Sai Casametti from our team, and closing reflections on the next steps for the guidelines by Mr. Patrick Blake from UNEP U4E. So let's move on to the opening. Sneha, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marco. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're joining from. And thanks to U4E for this forum to discuss this very important topic. I'd like to set the context for why we urgently need to advance the efficiency levels for ceiling fans. Why worry about an appliance that uses 70 to 80 watts as compared to, say, an air conditioner that uses 1500 watts? One, it's because of the sheer number of fans in operations. There are about 8 billion in annual global sales of ceiling fans. And in most markets around the world, these products are largely unregulated beyond some basic safety requirements. But secondly, not only is there a large number of installed fans, but their operating hours tend to be pretty significant. In parts of the world, countries in the global south, for example, fans are an almost year-round operation, running most hours of the day. As a result, this seemingly humble energy user, humble in terms of energy consumption, it ends up representing a significant portion of the residential energy demand. For example, in India, ceiling fans accounted for about 40% of India's total residential energy consumption in 2021. And at the turn of the decade, in spite of growing AC penetration, fans are still projected to be a major contributor, accounting for nearly a third of India's residential electricity consumption in 2030. Market data in other parts of the world also tells us that in spite of a growing AC growth, fan sales will continue steadily on for the foreseeable future. Fans are important also because for many, they represent the first step towards accessing thermal comfort. They effectively move the air in a space, creating a feeling of coolness, essentially like a wind chill effect. As many countries in Asia and Africa work on electrification programs for rural households, this is expected to generate a greater demand for fans as the first point of access to cooling for many. So that makes fan a fairly unique cooling appliance. In several parts of the world, fans in homes are as ubiquitous as light bulbs. Even in houses with air conditioners, fans are often used in combination with ACs, and research indicates that they can reduce reliance on air conditioning. Now, because of the relatively low energy use of a single fan, fans thus far have kind of flown under the energy efficiency radar. However, now there's increasing recognition of the substantial potential they represent in terms of reducing the energy footprint of space cooling. To give an idea of the magnitude, let's use India's example again. There are roughly 450 to 500 million fans in use. There are roughly 40 million new fans sold annually. Now, there are commercially available products that use half the energy that a typical fan uses, and yet their sales are less than 5%, roughly around 3%. If we transformed this entire residential ceiling fan segment towards high efficiency fans, this can actually save around 15% of India's total residential power consumption annually. And the avoided emissions would be equivalent to nearly a third of the annual emissions from all the cars running on the roads in India, so roughly 30 million cars. That makes a pretty solid case for fan efficiency as a very meaningful contributor to the energy transition and emission reduction goals. In my humble view, we have some catching up to do in terms of advancing the energy efficiency in ceiling fans. Market instruments and interventions will have an important role to play, and you'll hear more about this later in the webinar. And also, effective policy instruments such as minimum energy performance standards, labels, these would be a critical foundation to accelerate the transition towards energy efficient ceiling fans. I'll stop there and pass it on to Marco to share more on this.
Thank you very much, Sneha, for reminding us also on the important role and the implications of fans for in the economy, but also for accessing thermal comfort and the mechanisms that we can make in order to reduce the electricity waste or to reduce or to unlock economic savings as well from these devices. I will now just provide general context on the U4E guidelines, the approach and the progress that was taken for the development. And then we are actually working in the country savings assessments for ceiling funds. And then the approach that will be taken is that there are some key countries that will be selected in order to calculate the potential savings. These are mainly in Southeast Asia. And then these are preliminary results from the model that we are currently developing on the potential opportunities. And as you can see, depending on the scenarios of the minimum ambition and the high ambition, there's actually a very considerable amount of savings that can be unlocked from the year 2020, which is our baseline, to 2040. And also, if we move to the right side, we will see that the minimum ambition scenario will have significant cumulative electricity savings in 13% in the minimum ambition and high ambition all the way to 30%. And similar for the CO2 emissions as well, from indirect CO2 emissions. We're also preparing this this will be available for each of the countries, and then this is a combined savings potential, and then you can see the work that we're preparing and the different countries that are being considered for the minimum ambition scenario or the high ambition scenario as well. We'll be releasing this very soon, but we wanted to provide a preview on the potential opportunities for ceiling funds. Now, the U4E model regulation guidelines is part of a series of these guidelines that we have been developing for the last years, since 2019, and prior to that on lighting as well. We have for the U4E products, the lighting, electric motors, distribution transformers, but also recently commercial refrigeration, and prior to that, domestic refrigerators and room ACs. These are guidance to inform regulatory authorities and policymakers to set up not only minimum energy performance standards, which are certainly key, but also to take voluntary approaches through incentive programs. This is why, like, besides the floor or the minimum ambition, we also have the higher tiers to understand what is efficient and high efficient, and then what to target for these programs. There have been over 60 technical experts that have provided their voluntary expertise in order to advise and steer the development of this. And then for the cooling ones, they also have refrigerant global warming potential ceiling, and then and the dual focus as well. Last year, in MOP 35, we released the ceiling funds, the model regulation, which is the ones that we'll be presenting today. And then we'll have, as per every of the model guidelines, we have the guidelines, which provide scope of products, terms and definitions, requirements, and other content that Max will go through in more detail. But we also have the supporting documentation, which provides the rationale, the analysis, the data that was available that we used, and the cost benefits and other considerations for the recommendations provided. How this work and what are the roles and responsibilities? So UNEP is champion in the development and promotion of this work. We convened with U4E partners and other experts to gather the information and to steer the development of the contents. And we are the arbiter at the end on the final decisions that are being made on the methodology and the recommendations. LDNL, as I mentioned before, the technical partner, they review the best practices, develop methodology, and conduct the analysis as well, and then refine the content. Then U4E partners and affiliates provide all the expertise and technical input in order to not only ensure that we're providing the best possible recommendations, but to also have the voice of the different partners and representatives. And then we have additional experts for reviews and additional inputs in various rounds as well. Partnership effort for the ceiling funds, we had over 40 technical experts, and this can be consulted in the acknowledgement section of the document as well. We're very thankful, of course, for all the support that was received for this purpose. The development timeline of these guidelines for funds, where initial outreach was in December 2022 with expert volunteers. Then we had a kickoff meeting in January 2023. and consultations all the way to preparing the first drafts in June 2023, which were shared for review and for different inputs, and we develop a revised version for final review. In July 2023, we started also the data collection and the model development for the country safety assessments or impact assessments, as you saw before. And then we had the launch at MOF 35 during the first energy efficiency workshop carried under the meeting of the Montreal Protocol, the parties to the Montreal Protocol. And then we will continue doing promotion through webinars, events, and capacity building workshops as well. Just coming up, well, in 2023, we also developed the model quality and performance guidelines for off-grid refrigeration equipment. These were also released back in MOP 35. And then we're currently working on an update for the model guidelines for room air conditioners to also include the provisions for heat pumps. And in the future, we will be thinking about adding, we're doing the thinking to add water heaters, commercial ACs, and beyond. So now we will go back to Mr. Max Wei from Lawrenceburg National Laboratory, who will be presenting on the contents. Max, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Marco and Sneha. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Great. So thank you, everyone. I'll be discussing the approach to developing the U4E ceiling fan model standards. And again, as Marco mentioned, there's a model regulation document and a model regulation annex that has all the information that I'll be describing in much greater detail. So next slide, please. I'd just like to acknowledge my collaborators, Chao Ding and Nihar Shah. So just before I get started, just a few brief words on Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. So we're a laboratory which is managed by the University of California for the United States Department of Energy, one of about 17 national labs in the US. I believe it was the first one and the home of big science pioneered by Ernest Lawrence. But we're really dedicated to solving some of the most pressing scientific problems facing the world. And in particular, we have more than 3 decades of work internationally on clean energy and climate policy, and in particular on appliance standards, where the first appliance standards, I believe, were developed, at least in the US, in the 1970s with Art Rosenfeld and team. So we're very proud of that heritage, and we continue that work today. So next slide. So for today, the topics that I'll be covering are the following. I'll be starting with a market overview and the scope of covered products. I'll discuss briefly some test considerations and standards sort of landscape. And then I'll dive a little bit more deeply into the energy efficiency analysis, benchmarking with existing standards across the world, and arrive at the recommended standard levels. And this will be a little bit on the technical side, so apologies for that in advance. And then the next 2 topics will be more logistics and implementation. So some brief remarks on safety and functional performance, and entry into force, conformity assessment, surveillance, and revision. I'll kind of explain what all those things mean briefly later. And finally end with some implementation starting points and supporting activities. So next slide, please. So in terms of the market overview, as Sneha mentioned, ceiling fan revenues represent a substantial portion of the electric fan market median value of approximately 45%. And it's important to note that there are many different types of fans, and they come with different names. So you see the names pedestal fans, tower fans, table fans, wall fans, and so on. But certainly ceiling fans, I think everyone is familiar with. They are attached permanently to the ceiling, and they have a rotating blade, which is typically, 1,500 millimeters in diameter is a common size. So the left plot just shows the revenue from 8 billion increasing to about 11 billion by 2031, and approximately 250 million sales in 2023, increasing to about 350 million in 2031. So next slide. Asia Pacific is the largest regional share, in both of those years with about 2/3 of the overall market. And you can see from the last column in the table, the compound annual growth rate is pretty strong, estimated to be at about 4% per year over the next decade. Next slide, please. So I'll be discussing the model guidelines focus and why we chose to focus on ceiling fans as opposed to including all of the different fan types. So in the top plot, you can see from a recent EC report that among all of the fan types, ceiling fans have a much higher energy efficiency at the same power level, so the much higher service level, which I'll describe that metric in a moment, for a given power level of about 60 watts is about 3 to 6 times higher for the same power level. So and the bottom plot is just showing a box plot trying to represent a similar set of data. So we recommend separate standards for ceiling fans and non-ceiling fans, since ceiling fans are a large, distinct electric fan market segment, and they can have different use cases, different application, and different designs from the other fan types. So it is possible that we will come back later with another set of guidelines for the other fan types. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to just discuss some test considerations, and just to say that this is an important part of the rating process in rating the efficiency of a fan. So the test standard that most countries use are based on the IEC 60879 test protocol. So that's an international, very well defined, very specified test protocol. And the energy efficiency metric is also known as a ceiling fan service value, which is shown in the box below. And this is defined as the airflow, the total airflow, divided by the power at full speed. And the units of that are meters cubed per minute of airflow per watt. So this term is used very interchangeably with energy efficiency, so it might be confusing in some cases. But in general, higher airflow and lower power gives greater efficiency, and larger values of ceiling fan service value are better. So we want a high value of this ceiling fan service value. I'll note that the airflow is measured in a plane at a specified distance from the ceiling fan, a distance h, and that the temperature, humidity ranges, and other distances, the width of the sensors in particular, are all specified by the test protocol. So it's very important to be aware of the testing protocol and these geometries to measure the ceiling fan efficiency. So next slide, please. And just very briefly, a landscape, just building upon what Sneha mentioned, there's a high potential, and Marco, there's a high potential energy savings from a wider deployment of MEPS, which are minimum energy performance standards. A limited number of countries have MEPS for ceiling fans. I have a table below. I'm not going to go over the whole table. That's really for reference. But the key point is that there's an opportunity for much wider MEPS deployment and or tightening of existing energy efficiency standards in those countries that have them today. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to dive into some of the development of the standards and the benchmarking and the recommended energy efficiency standard levels. So this slide is showing energy efficiency standards for China and India. So the market is much bigger in India, but a lot of ceiling fans are produced in China. And just focusing on the right-hand plot, the lowest and highest level. So again, a higher value is better. And so the yellow and the topmost curve are the lowest and highest energy efficiency levels in India. So in India, they have a 1-star, 2-star, up to 5-star. So that shows the 1-star and 5-star. And the levels in China are slightly below that, but within about 15%. So, and the efficiency levels are quoted as a function of the fan blade diameter. And in general, you can achieve higher efficiency with higher fan blade diameter. So you have an increasing energy efficiency target with fan blade diameter. Next slide, please. And similarly, we benchmarked other countries that have ceiling fan efficiency standards, including Brazil, Vietnam, Mexico, and they're shown here. And in this benchmarking, India has the highest energy efficiency level, so that's the topmost curve in yellow, and the value there is about 3 to 4.3, as you can see. And so we start, and much of the market is below 1500 millimeters, as I mentioned, FYI. And so we start with the India 1-star level as the proposed minimum energy efficiency level. Next slide, please. And this is just showing in greater detail the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star levels. So it's just a staircase from the yellow to the blue to the green and onward for those different star levels in India as a function of fan diameter. And an important note is that concomitant with the efficiency metric levels, there's a minimum air delivery. So that's minimum air in meters cubed per minute, or minimum airflow as a function of fan diameter. That's very important because it's possible to build a very energy efficient fan with a very low airflow. So we want to avoid that. So India in particular does a nice job of including this minimum airflow requirement as well. So that's the plot on the right. Next slide, please. I'm showing here the current energy efficiency standards in the US, just for reference and for instructive purposes. And it's just showing the US baseline, which is the bottommost dashed curve in yellow, and the various proposed efficiency levels in a preliminary rulemaking from 2022 for the US. And it's just showing that the US baseline is considerably lower than the 1-star level in India. But this is just, I believe this is, we've shown that this is an artifact of the testing protocol, and that there's a different testing protocol in the US. So this apparent difference of about 2 units of efficiency is really an artifact, a difference in the testing height and the width of the configuration just shown. But it really highlights the importance and the sensitivity to the testing standards. So just keep that in mind, that that's a very important piece and very specified. Next slide, please. From the US preliminary standard, we also have some good data on ceiling fan efficiency versus cost. So in general, for a higher efficiency level, there's a cost, increasing cost known as an energy efficiency cost curve. And a couple of notes on the cost curve shown here: increase in cost above baseline plotted on the y-axis, and energy efficiency improvement over the baseline plotted on the x-axis. Is that the EE cost curve is more favorable for larger fans, so it's a shallower curve, lower cost to achieve higher efficiency with larger fans, and also that there's a considerable energy efficiency improvement potential gain from shifting to brushless DC or BLDC motors. So those are the circle points. So for example, for the 1321 millimeter size, there's a 50% nominal energy efficiency improvement and with a cost increase of about 37%. Next slide, please. Now for the maximum efficiency levels, we try to look at the best performance markets around the world. And we looked at fans from the E Top 10 database, as well as the Energy Star database in the United States. So Energy Star is just a program of very highly energy efficient rated programs in products in the United States. And those are shown in the plot, again, service value or efficiency versus diameter. And so we look at the upper envelope of those data points, and we make sure that they're not unique suppliers. So there's more than one supplier, there's general availability, and we make the correction that I mentioned before for the US testing standard difference, which is about 2 units. So we get, as a function of diameter, a high energy efficiency level of 9, below 120 or 1200 millimeters, and an energy efficiency level of 11, greater than 120 centimeters, as shown here, the topmost black lines. Next slide, please. So putting all of that together, here are the U4E recommended minimum, medium, and maximum standards in tabular form, and on the right in graphical form. So they are in yellow for the minimum and in orange at the top for the maximum. And the medium is just the median of those two, so those are in the gray. So it varies from small fan diameters from 750 millimeters up to about 1800 or 1900 millimeters, and the service value or energy efficiency values range from about 3 up to 4, 5, up to 9 and 11. So next slide, please. Okay, I'm going to spend a few slides just talking about some of the practical considerations, and further information on safety and functional performance can be found in Chapter 10 of the Model Regulation Annex. But we do discuss installation, so that has to do with the structural mounting requirements, since this is a permanent installation. Sometimes these fans can be, somewhat heavy, not super heavy. The ceiling fan height and distance from the ceiling, so the minimum height above the floor and the minimum distance from the ceiling. Operating conditions, such as these are rated for indoor use only, and there is some temperature range guidance. So very generally speaking, you probably don't want to run a ceiling fan when it's super, super hot, like say over 43 degrees Celsius. But there is some, that science is really shifting and changing over time. So it's kind of a range, but there's some remarks there for the temperature range of operation. And then ceiling fan placement considerations. So this has to do with distance from fire alarms and from water sprinkler systems. You don't want to obstruct these types of other systems. Next slide, please. And on entry into force, conformity, market surveillance, and revision. Entry into force refers to the start date and minimum duration of regulation. Declaration of conformity refers to the compliance with energy efficiency requirements and things which are called a conformity assessment report, or CAR. Market surveillance has to do with compliance verification, market monitoring, test lab accreditation, and so forth. And finally, revision has to do with the frequency of strengthening these regulations. So like the frequency could be on the beat rate of every 3 to 4 years, for example. But again, further information on these items can be found in the model regulation. And I should also say that there's also a section in the annex on improving fan performance through blade design and through the motor type, as I mentioned. So next slide, please. So now a few moments on implementation preparation. So if these are new to your location or country, potential starting points include, are there nearby countries with MEPs to consult with or to see how things are being organized? And similarly, are there any testing facilities nearby? And if the fan standard is new, you could consider starting at the minimum standard level that we have here. But if your location or country has a standard already in place, you could consider a medium service level if you feel there's capacity to meet that, or higher than the minimum service level here. And in terms of other supporting activities, one can do a market study to quantify the baseline and potential savings in your country, and also to consider program designs to support greater efficiency, such as introducing different MEPS level, like 1-star or 1 level, or level 1, level 2, level 3, etc. Public procurement programs, incentive programs to offset some of the costs that I showed to much higher efficiency fans, and energy efficiency labels to really help consumers navigate many different products and choose among many different products. Next slide, please. And this is just kind of a step-by-step set of steps that could be taken if your location or country is fairly new to introducing efficiency standards. So very briefly, setting objectives, defining roles and regulatory bodies, developing a national market assessment, preparation of the maps, considering these model regulations, holding workshops for stakeholders, capacity building and training for testing, for market surveillance, and developing and adopting specific programs such as public procurement and communication campaigns. Next slide, please. Finally, I just end with this slide to say that over many decades, 30 or so decades, in the US and across the world, standards, labeling, green public procurement, and market incentives really work to save consumers a lot of money, billions and billions of dollars over the decades. So really trying to up-level, just starting from the bottom, up-level minimum energy performance standards, banning inefficient products, labels to help buyers, again, understand the benefits of energy efficient products, and financial incentives to support adoption of the best products. And that the U4E model regulations can help to guide us in setting up these levels. So with that, I'll conclude, and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Max, for doing a rundown on the context and also like the thinking that was done for this process. And now we're gonna move to Mr. Vishal Tapa from CLASP, who he's going to be presenting us on the experiences on the India's transition to energy efficiency funds and opportunities for countries to achieve ambitious energy levels as well. I will be just changing the screen, so bear with me for a moment. Here we go. Okay. Vishal, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Marco. And ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you to U4E for this opportunity. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever part of the world you're in. It's great to be here. In the discussion so far, you've already heard about the need. I think Sneha captured it very well. Marco added some additional points to it. We've heard from Max that in terms of the standards are in place, the potential regulations for MEPs and what those models could look like are in place. So we have the need well established. We have the elements to deal with them pretty well established. We know what needs to be done. What I want to do is give you a little bit of the color in terms of what are the forces at play as we begin to implement this, and what are the things that we can do to try to ensure that whatever we think we can catalyze, we're able to catalyze. How can we bring these regulations in place? What are the types of challenges that we have to address? And while each country has a slightly different context and answers to a different set of motivations, nonetheless, overall, I think there are elements that you can gather from the India story, and I just want to take the opportunity to present it. While I'm presenting the story, while I'm doing it on behalf of CLASP, I just want also to recognize that there's several partners that are working collectively on this, and I'm simply the messenger of, I think, all of the effort that is being undertaken in this regard. Next slide, please. So I want to first, this slide has two parts. If you see on the left, these are the numbers that Sneha has already sort of highlighted in opening remarks. The need is pretty well established. The numbers are there, what the importance of it, the magnitude of it is well described. So I'll focus you more on the right side. And there, I just want to talk you a little bit through the institutional approach that India has taken in terms of some of these minimum energy performance standard. Max had a very, very well laid out discussion of the standards and energy efficiency policies currently in place. So in India, the institutional agency responsible for setting the minimum energy performance standard and MEPS is the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. The Bureau of Indian Standards is another agency that establishes test methods and standard quality standards, but it does not prescribe an energy efficiency MEPS program that the Bureau then takes over. And it does so under the authority granted to it under the Energy Conservation Act, which established that agency, but at the same time also gives it the power to institute these kind of product efficiency policies. So when you look at fans, it was obviously an important product recognized very quickly on. The first program came on in 2008, covering some of the fans, not of all sizes, but of some sizes. And in general, the way that policymaking takes place in India is that, first is launched as a voluntary program. That means people can choose to, manufacturers can choose to label or not label. But then after a certain while, and generally in 2 to 3 years period, it shifts from a voluntary to a mandatory program. So it took a long time in fans to transition from a voluntary to a mandatory one. And while there might be a number of factors, I think one of the key aspects to this is that it is, there's a very large base of small manufacturers, almost informal in nature sometimes, small and medium enterprises, and our estimate is close to 50% of the production comes from those. You heard the order of magnitude in terms of how many fans is sold, what's the stock of markets, but at the same time, such is coming from small. So in some sense, that was one of the headwinds to which you get moving from a voluntary to a mandatory program. When it was launched finally in 2022 and it incorporated all the fans of all sizes that Max described very well, what we find is that if you take the 1 star and the 5 stars, he mentioned 1 star being the least efficient and 5 star being the most efficient, you see almost the vast majority, 87% to be precise, is located at around 1 star. And then only a very small fraction is towards the 5 star. So the question is, how can then we try to move the market up towards a higher level of efficiency? Now they're 1 star to 5 star. We want to, in essence, nudge the market up. And this is where we've begun to collaborate with several partners to support a program that Energy Efficiency Services Limited, which is India's large ESCO company, state-owned, has launched this program called the 10 million super efficient fans. And the idea of this program is essentially to nudge the market efficiency up, and so that it then consequently has a ripple effect back to the MEPS anyway. Next slide, please. So we are part of a consortium that is helping to implement this program, and we're providing technical assistance and capacity building support to Energy Efficiency Services Limited, who is the implementing agency for it. The Clean Cooling Collaborative that Sneha mentioned, some of the work she's doing, is being one of the co-creators of this program, and there are several other partners from civil society, including us, Shakti, and the Alliance for a Energy Efficient Economy, that are serving different aspects of it. So very, very broadly, there's 4 different aspects that we are supporting with technical assistance and capacity building. One is to think about the program design. So how do you go to market? What are these fans? What's the sequencing of it, etc. Second is, this is small products, millions of products. How do you get it? How do you manage the supply, etc. for a company that's an ESCO, not necessarily a retail enterprise? Third component, how do you look at the supply side integration? How do you look at quality control? How do you manage the control? Where's testing done? How do you enforce the standards? How do you make sure there are no breakages in the system? And how do you do it in a way that's robust and cost efficient at the same time? And finally, how do you generate the demand for this? In the scale that we have seen, the initial procurement, which is I think about 2 million fans out of this 10 million, we've already begun to see a significant price reductions and quite a considerable amount of interest in the industry to want to support it. So we're very excited to where this program can be. Next slide, please. So while we're supporting ESL and this program, the idea is really 3 trigger points that we think collectively will help then further enhance the MEPS level. So what we're doing through this program is trying to move the market efficiency up in a way that creates the prerequisites or the preconditions for a continuous movement or a shift upwards in the MEPS level. So one is about the program is focused around creating demand certainty for suppliers, who in essence is driving them the economies of scale and enabling the cost reductions that's there. Second is, while this program is a fourth of what it will, what the total market size is at the moment, the idea is that even small amounts will begin to immediately ripple effect into the market. So it creates a considerable spillover. There's great acceptance of the products. There's more products that are coming into the market, and we're already seeing some of that through even the small request that for proposal that's gone out in terms of the first procurement. And then the third part that we're working is to see how can we work better with the small and medium enterprises to make sure that they're better integrated in it. So there is a percolation of technologies for them to enable production of these energy efficient. There is improved compliance and their ability to compete in this marketplace is well established. So collectively, the idea is when all of this is put together, it in essence comes back to saying, hey, if the market efficiency is moving up, if we can move the market efficiency up, then can we pull the MEPS policies up as well in due course? So this is trying to set up the preconditions for a revision so that we have a further increase in the energy efficiency of these products through MEPS. And I think those are all the slides I have. I hope I've been able to convey some of this. Happy to take questions and engage in discussions later on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michel, for the presentation. I think it's quite illustrative from a comprehensive program that is setting the MEPS, but also it's bringing the market approaches and how to work with the supply chain and also how to develop the different steps that would also help in the pathway to enhance the MEPS for a second round and bring additional efficiency to this sector. I'm going back now to the other presentation. Just bear with me while I move back to Mr. Tan. Here we go. Okay, so now we will travel to hear from the Chinese experience on energy efficiency standards and labels for electric fans, and how it can be leveraged for accelerating energy efficiency standards harmonization in Southeast Asia. And today we have Mr. Tan Zheng from Energy Foundation China, who will be sharing with us the perspectives. Tan, the floor is yours, and just please bear with me while I choose the other presentation. Here we go.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco. Can you hear me?
Yes, it's all good. You can start. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, dear colleagues. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Zheng Tan from Energy Foundation China, based in Beijing. First of all, I thank UNEP's U4E for inviting me to share our perspectives on how minimum energy performance standards and the labeling schemes are implemented in China and their implications on accelerating the market transition towards higher efficient electric fan in Southeast Asia, given China is the world's largest producer and exporter of electric fans. Next slides, please. Okay, this is the contents of our report. First, I will introduce domestic and export market of electric fans, and then the MEPS development in China and energy label implementation in China, and also the MEPS and energy label implementation in ASEAN region, and some thoughts on energy efficiency standards and the labeling harmonization in the region. Next slide, please. Regarding the production, China, production of household electric fans is on the rise between 2016 and 2021 and reported around 150 million units in 2021 in China. In the year, around 47 million household fans were sold in China. Mainly are floor standing fan, counting 40%, and only 55% ceiling fans, because you know the urbanization of China, the urbanization rate now is more than 64%, and also more and more families can afford room air conditioners. So this kind of products is decreasing. The sales is decreasing. I mean, not the sales, the growth rate of the sales in China of ceiling fan is decreasing in recent years. The market is like a mature market. Next slide, please. Regarding the exports, the total export of China in last year is 430 million electric fans, but among that, only 100 million household electric fans. The rest are, you know, small fans for computers and some toy fans with batteries. That does not include in our study, and 82 million standing fans, 60 million desk fans, and 46 million ceiling fans. Asia is China's largest export market. Nearly half of its total export units, followed by North America and Europe. Major export destination countries and the region include the Philippines, Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Japan, South Korea, US, and UK. Next slide, please. So China introduced the first electric fan maps in 1989, then revised twice in 2028 and 2021 respectively. And the current version is the version upgraded by 2021. The energy efficiency grade 1, which has been improved by 39% to 80.6%, boosting a robust increase in energy efficiency. Because the current version also integrated the DC fans based and integrated with AC fans. The energy efficiency grade 3, which is the market entry level, has also been improved by 1.1% to 46. Slide, please. This slide shows the comparison of electric fan maps of China with U4E module regulation ceiling fan component. Yeah, Max Wei also introduced this, and you can see the market entrance level of China's maps is a bit lower. U4E module regulation indicators. The testing method of the ceiling fan in China's maps is aligned with the IEC standard testing standards 60879, but the testing equipment, testing procedure, and testing method are consistent. But the airflow calculation has a little difference. Okay, next slide. So the after China upgraded the maps, the energy label implementation rules has been released the year after, and you can see this is how the China energy label for electric fan looks like. Next slide, please. So before the implementation of the latest maps, electric fan production registered as energy efficient grade 1, grade 2, accounted for nearly 70% of the total. And after the implementation of the maps in late 2022, most grade 2 and grade 3 products in the old maps have been phased out. Currently, electric fan products registered as grade 1 and grade 2 under the new maps is around 22%. For ceiling fan, half of the ceiling fan registered in the China energy label system are grade 1 products already. So you can see very good market transformation after the enforcement of the new maps. So next slide, please. Okay, this table I quoted from the U4E module regulation. It shows, current status of maps for fans in ASEAN region. Only 3 countries have maps. Malaysia and Vietnam have maps for ceiling fans. Last year, the Philippines released implementing guidelines for energy labeling program for electric fans, and they adopted IEC testing methods, but still no maps. Thailand introduced voluntary ministerial regulation prescribing high efficient electric fans, including ceiling fans, with 2 categories, with the blade diameter of 1200 and 1400, but still no maps. Countries without maps and energy labeling programs are facing very big challenges monitoring their energy efficiency compliance in the market. So next slide, please. This is I took some pictures when I visit these countries, and also I collected some pictures online. From the left half, you will see of these slides, you will see countries with maps and the labeling schemes, such as Malaysia and Vietnam. Normally, this label will be sticked on the fan itself. They are requested to be sticked on the packages. You can see down in Vietnam, they even stick the energy label on the ceiling fan blade. And in the right side, you will see in the countries without maps and the labeling schemes, such as Cambodia and Laos. So according to a study by IIEC, up to 30% of appliance shops in Laos reported that they directly imported appliance from China and Thailand. And 38% household respondents recall high number 5 energy label on fans. Very few household respondents recall household appliance in Laos with Chinese energy labels because of the difficult readability. So next slide, please. So these are some thoughts, energy efficiency standards and labeling harmonization in Southeast Asia. So now we have U4E module regulation on a ceiling fan developed. So how we can leverage the effort, the setting and harmonizing maps and labeling schemes in the region. So first, we think improving energy efficiency of ceiling fans in China is very important. So we will keep improving the stringency of China's maps because China is a key exporter of this product. And also, we have to enhance international collaboration in harmonizing maps and testing methods because there is no big difference. Even I know that China and India has a little difference, comparing to the international testing standards, but most of countries adopt the same testing method, which is IEC method. So this is the key to make our testing results transportable and comparable. And in countries without maps, harmonizing energy labels is crucial in facilitating informed purchasing decisions for consumers. Because in that unregulated markets, products seeking different labels will create confusion for the consumers. Strengthening bilateral and multilateral dialogues on setting maps for importing countries and assist local testing capacity building and the China-ASEAN framework is quite important. And also promoting mutual recognition of certification and the labeling schemes can reduce the testing cost for the both exporters, fan producers, and market regulators. Last but not least, intensify awareness raising among stakeholders, including policymakers, ceiling fan producers, and end user, facility builder, and owners are important. Next slide, last slides, I think. So, based on EFC's work, we think we can borrow the idea of improving China's room air conditioner energy efficiency work, borrow this idea to improve the ceiling fan energy efficiency standards and labeling harmonization in the region. On one hand, we have to improve the stringency of maps and also the export products by national actions, and also we have to closely work with international organizations and the governments and market players and consumers, etc., to raise awareness and highlight the significance of this international collaboration. For example, EFC also works with partners in the region like government Cambodia and launched the first ever national cooling action plan with very clear roadmap on setting minimum energy performance standards for cooling products like room AC, refrigerator, and fans. During this process, we also learn from each other within the framework of co-collision, and different platforms, so that the capacity in the region can be highly improved. So that's all. Thank you for the opportunity and your time.
Thank you very much, Dan, for the presentation and the overview of the experience, the lessons learned, but also like how this can be put into place in Southeast Asia and also in other regions as well. We will now move to the Q&A session. Sai, the floor is yours to moderate, and colleagues, please encourage you or invite you to also add to share your questions.
Thanks, Marco. I guess even before I start, I already see a hand that is raised. So yeah, I think without further ado, I would invite the questions. And yeah, so just would like to remind, so there are three means. One is through the chat box, other is the Q&A option on the above, and the final one is the raising your hand. And I see a raised hand, and please unmute. Yeah, Charles, I'm unmuting you, and you could pose your question. Yeah, please, Charles, please go ahead and pose your question.
Okay, my question is for China. How do you phase out progressively the old maps in the market? I can see you are doing a wonderful work and wonderful job on eliminating the old map in the market. And also the second question on China, or how do you harmonize the map in the region? I can see there's a variety of map in different countries in Asia. And do you have any problem in harmonizing the maps? The last question is for CLAPS and U4E. It's for CLAPS and U4E. Have you had, do you have any pilot project where you have implemented those maps you have developed? I know CLAPS and U4E, you are doing a wonderful job in terms of development of map. We are very used to the map for motor and things. And do you have any pilot project where you have implemented those map you have developed? What I know is that in the ECOWAS region, we have developed map for farms, for sure. And is there any opportunities from CLAPS or U4E to support those regional maps we have developed, for example, and how to implement those maps on the ground? Thank you.
Mr. Tanzan, yeah.
Okay. Gentleman, Mr. Charles. So if I understand correctly, your question is how we harmonize the maps in the region, right?
Exactly.
So.
And the second question was how we are phasing out the old map. That was the second question.
Okay. So it is difficult to harmonize maps, you know. Okay. Yeah, from my personal experiences, it's not an easy job. So this is why we need international collaboration and dialogues. Because if the economy or country does not have maps, that means they leave their market unregulated. So, so if there is no market entrance threshold, then the inefficient products can easily flow into those regions. So this is why we encourage every country without maps to establish their own maps as soon as possible. We understand that some countries don't have production, only they consume the products. So in order to improve the stringency of the maps, they are highly encouraged to adopt the most stringent maps to help their people save electricity. But in the meantime, we have to consider the affordability of the local citizens. So sometimes the cost, or we say cost performance, will be used as an excuse that they don't want to have stringent maps, because the normally, the higher the maps is, the higher cost, the higher price the product has. But from my experience about room air conditioners, if the scalability of the production can be guaranteed, that means the price will not be an issue at all. So for those economies and countries have maps, particularly they have their own productions. So the resistance could be coming from the industries instead of consumers, because they want to protect their own production capacity. So in this case, at least the testing methods should be harmonized first, so that the testing results can be transportable and comparable in the region. That means either either through the labeling schemes, or I don't know, U4E's, it's like a third party testing lab, then the testing results can be compared, that and the users and consumers can compare, which even they have different forms of labeling, consumers can compare the results, so that the market transparency of energy efficiency can be guaranteed. So the testing method should be the first priority of harmonization of the ceiling fan standard. Regarding the second question, I mean, how to improve the maps regularly and phase out the old maps. I think this is the normal practice of how maps innovates. So maybe after 2 to 3 years, the maps should be revised according to the technology, innovation, and the best available technology of energy efficiency. And also, this is why we need international benchmarking, and such as the U4E module regulation. In this document, different countries, the maps of different countries will be compared, and their minimum allowed values of energy efficiency can be seen on the same page, so people will compare. Then I think in this way the old maps can be phased down gradually. So then in this region, the energy efficiency and the stringency of energy efficiency standards and the labeling schemes can be aligned. We cannot say harmonized, but aligned at the maximum level. That will be a good output. of this effort. So thank you.
Thank you, Tan. And maybe for the third question on the work and the potential support for ECOWAS and so on. We have good progress on other cooling products that have had modern regulation guidelines, let's say in the past, especially in the region as well, but in other places on air conditioners, on refrigerators, also commercial refrigeration. And especially, I wanted to mention that, Charles, that in the ECOWAS region as well, we're currently working with countries that are members of the organization, with Nigeria and with the Gambia, on updating their air conditioning maps. And this same approach can certainly lead, now that we have the funds model regulation guidelines, to also like support countries to develop their maps on funds from the side of U4E. And also even like on a regional approach as well, together with for the ECOWAS region as well. I know that you have in ECOWAS have done this for other products in the past, and then this could certainly lead to further opportunities on that regard. And maybe, I don't know if Vishal wanted to also refer a bit on CLASP. I know that may not be the same region, but just if you wanted to provide a general overview.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles, for the question. I think your question was whether we've implemented any pilot maps projects, or any pilot. So the way that we work is we work as independent advisors to the government, providing minimum energy performance standards, technical assistance towards those. So we've been quite instrumental in collaborating with the government to provide the technical assistance required for those maps. So in India and in many other parts of the world, we've been working to solicit information on fans. This sometimes involves testing, sometimes gathering the evidence, etc., that forms the basis and brings the the technical analysis, the economic analysis, and all of the other analysis that's necessary in the rulemaking process to enhance the maps. So that's the type of advice that we do, and the recent changes that you saw to India, which is a couple of years ago, was a result of that kind of support that we provided. I also did want to, while we're on the subject of harmonization, and although it was not a question for me, I just wanted to draw your attention to a small bit of thing that will not have caught your attention. Very recently, India and Bhutan, the government of Bhutan, signed a memorandum of understanding on collaboration and energy efficiency, and the objective of that is really towards the goal of harmonization, and it's the idea of harmonization is a very broad spectrum. So getting harmonization in standards is one thing, but for many important countries, the question is, how can we recognize the type of MEPS work that is done in other countries which are exporting? And so what that collaboration aims to do is really assist importing countries to recognize and use the MEPS of other countries so they can, in effect, create their own verification system within their country. So it's, the collaboration is between two countries, in this case, Bhutan, etc. is only, so I think it's a small pilot, but it could, I feel, lead towards a larger effort. And they certainly talk about collaborating across South Asia in terms of how importing and exporting countries can now begin to collaborate in sort of using these MEPS that are formed so that the importing countries avoid the need of building huge testing capacity and so on and so forth. Thank you.
I think the sessions were comprehensive, and so was this question and the answer as well. I don't see any questions further, but would encourage if the participants, if they have any, if they would like to seek further clarification on any aspects. Meanwhile, may I take the opportunity to pose a question to Mr. Max from LBNU? So, yeah, we usually are much aware of air conditioners, especially the testing lab requirements. I mean, usually a psychrometric chamber would cost around 0.5 million or so. So, could you provide any rough estimate of what would be the cost associated with setting up of a testing laboratory for ceiling fans? Like any ballpark number? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the question. I would just comment, just echoing what I think Cheng, our colleague from China, and others have mentioned the real importance of testing synchronization or testing harmonization is very important, because one of the things that I gathered from doing some of the analysis is that although a lot of the countries are based on the same IEC standard and the US is quite distinctly different, but even India has kind of a small difference, which is important to note, and China, as was noted, has another difference. So these things are quite subtle, but they can really make a difference. So I think that is very important, and how to achieve that is kind of a different question. But in terms of the capacity and the cost, I don't have a ballpark number at the tip of my fingers. I would say just based on the geometry. So one thing that I didn't mention is that there's also a geometry in the IEC protocol, which is a room. Like, what is the room, and what's the curtain height, and what's the distance above the floor from the curtain height, and what's the outer wall and inner wall. But I would say that it's probably not as much as an AC psychrometric chamber, just from first principles. But I don't have a ballpark estimate. But I definitely think that it is, it's going to be less. And I mean, basically, it's the chamber and configuration, which is like a room, and then it is the apparatus, and then it's the anemometers, so there's sensors, and then there's the data collection equipment. So there's some equipment involved, there's some sensors involved. I don't have an itemization. That's a great question, though. So thank you. I'll try to ask some of the colleagues here. And we don't have such a, we do have very extensive test chambers actually down on campus at UC Berkeley in the Center for Built Environment. So they definitely, I can definitely ask them and maybe get back.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess even the participants are also invited to write to us in case they stumble on any queries after the session, and we would very much welcome all your queries, and we would revert back. Thank you, and over to you, Marco. I don't see any questions.
Oh, excuse me. Maybe I had a follow-up question. And maybe this is a question for CLASP. And the question, and you may have touched upon this, but was just the off-market or the more informal market for ceiling fans in India. I've heard that that's not an insignificant portion of the market, and maybe like reuse or older products, repurposing, or just off-label. But can you just comment on that? Like, what is the size, what are the trends, and how CLASP and the Indian government is trying to address that piece? Because that's something I certainly didn't really delve into too much in our analysis. But I've heard it was mentioned a couple of times to us.
Thank you, Max, for the question. The point is that I think there is a large base of informal manufacturers, small and medium enterprises that are producing fans. When it was voluntary, when the labeling scheme was voluntary, or when the MEPS was voluntary, they didn't need to formally certify their products under the MEPS scheme. Now that it has become mandatory, it's essential for them to do so. The question is whether this informal and large base of manufacturers, small and medium enterprises, are able to be certified in this process. The one thing that I should mention is that in addition to the Bureau of Energy Efficiency Standard and Labeling Scheme, which looks at minimum energy performance standards, there's also from some other agency, the Department of Industries in effect, which has what is called a quality control. So they want certain kind of Bureau of Indian Standards labels to be integrated now across all products, like on a mandatory basis. And so as a result, the work is to try and make sure that we're able to support SMEs certify under these schemes so that there isn't a spurious set of market, products that's out in the market that are not compliant with these regulations. I think that's one of the ideas. And the second is, how to help them do that, but also make sure that they don't get left behind in this process as much as the industries are producing these fans. Make sure that they also get integrated into the formal market as these policies are now in effect. I hope that sort of addressed your question. I'm not sure it was entirely, of course, there's a lot more detail and depth to that, but I think that's a kind of a headline.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Over to you, Marco. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, colleagues, as well for the Q&A session. Very informative, and thanks to Charles also for his question that gave a lot of answers. Now we're gonna move for the closing reflections to Mr. Patrick Blake from UNEP U4E. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marco. And yeah, it's been very helpful to hear from all the speakers on the opportunities for ceiling fans in terms of the savings opportunity that can bring financial savings, electricity, providing more stable electricity grid, and also the greenhouse gas benefits. So in terms of just a few takeaways and on the next steps for the model regulations on ceiling fans, we touched on this some in the presentations. But building upon the process that we use to develop it, we will continue to work on different regional harmonization efforts, as was mentioned. There, we work together with regional centers and bring together economic groups and, of countries to align and harmonize standards. And we would the model regulations would be a starting point for that. And through those processes, it really helps in reducing trade barriers, the cost of implementation, also in setting up regional testing laboratories or using laboratories in other regions to reduce the cost of building new testing infrastructure, as was just referenced in the Q&A. Another way that we'll use the model regulations is also deployment at the national level. We have a number of different national projects and would be exploring that as well. And then, so a lot of that's really been focused on minimum energy performance standards, but a reminder that the model regulations can be used as well for voluntary efforts, voluntary approaches, such as incentives, and also can be used for labeling. So that's another opportunity to utilize the model regulations in that manner as well. And then lastly, throughout that all, it's not only United for Efficiency, but it's really a partnership approach. And we look to the partners that we have worked with for some time, including through the development of the model regulations for you as well to use this within your projects. So please do keep us updated on that, and any questions you may have on that and achievements, we try to track that throughout the process. And then just to conclude, really thank you to the funders of this work from the Clean Cooling Collaborative, and also from the UK Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. that has helped to make this these model regulations on ceiling fans possible, and also for the other model regulations as well. I really appreciate the speakers taking the time and sharing the perspectives, including Snea from Clean Cooling Collaborative, Max and colleagues from LBNL, thanks as well for the presentation, and also throughout the whole process that we worked together on this. Bishal from CLASP and Tang from Energy Foundation China for both sharing their experiences in India and also in China. Lastly, really thank you to Marco and the U4E team for pulling this webinar together for all the support. So with that, please do stay in touch with us, and we will, of course, share everything with you as well by email. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone, and have a good rest of your day or good evening until the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.